The Grim Drive podcast explores mental health through the lens of professional sports and athletes. Pro athletes come forward more and more with stories about their mental health journey, what they have endured, and how they managed to push through, reflecting a mental health stigma that continues to be reduced. Pro athletes also leverage mindset to achieve peak performance, as well as representing and often driving elements of popular culture through the use of social media, technology, and personal branding. This places athletes front and center as role models for people of all ages, giving them a platform to reach many and deliver important information, including information about mental health. Welcome to the Grim Drive podcast, where we explore mental health through the lens of professional sports and athletes. My name is Jonathan Busfield. I'm here as always with my co-host John Cunett and a special guest co-host Madeline Cerullo. Today we're going to delve into all things Ted Lasso, season 1 and 2. We might break that up into 2 episodes and even preview our thoughts and hopes and dreams for season 3. But first, I want to intro Madeline Cerullo. Madeline, welcome.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Good.
Fantastic. We're excited to have you here. I'm sure this will be the first of many Grim Drive podcast appearances for you.
Yes. So.
Maybe even Madeline spinoff. Who knows?
Yeah.
I hope so.
Glam Drive?
Yeah.
That's right? What I said. Glam Drive.
We've talked. We've thrown out ideas. It's in the works. Madeline is a clinical director at Riser and Tread, on the team with John and I, and we're very lucky to have her on the team at Riser and Tread and also here for the podcast. So we're excited to get into Ted Lasso. So, Ted Lasso, just to talk about, most people know what this show is, obviously. If you haven't, spoiler alert, we're going to get into things that reveal plot lines, characters, our favorite, scenes or episodes or things like that from the show. If you haven't seen it yet, definitely encourage you to go watch it. I think it broke the record for Emmys won and all kinds of other records on Apple TV and things like that. It is available on Apple TV. I watched it first with my brother-in-law. He has Apple TV, so I was just binge watching it over there. And then I just went and did a free 7-day trial to go back in and do a little deep dive. Yeah. Probably spent way too much time on it getting ready for this episode, but there's been 2 seasons so far. The third one's in the works. I think it's in production in February 2022, coming out in the summer of 2022. The writing's genius. It's equal parts kind of like funny, sports-centric, emotional. There weren't many expectations coming in. We've talked a lot about expectations, right? I think when expectations are low, it kind of benefits the end result. So how it came to be, I'm going to talk about that a little bit and just go through kind of a quick overview of the seasons. And then we're going to get into like sort of your main kind of key thing or takeaway or the one thing you guys really like about the show. And then we'll go from there. So it actually came to be from a 2000. I thought it was from a Saturday Night Live skit. It wasn't. His dancing is from a Saturday Night Live skit. The dance he does. You guys ever see What's Up With That? The skit.
I haven't seen the skit.
You have to Google
or
on YouTube watch What's Up With That. It's run by Keenan, I think.
Okay.
Keenan, right?
Yeah.
He hosts this fictitious game show and Jason Sudeikis is like a backup dancer on the show. So that's where he first kind of showed that dance. But the Ted Lasso kind of character came from a 2012 commercial as a joke, and then they redid it in 2013. Beard was even in it. Coach Beard was even in it as his assistant. I didn't know this.
No idea.
This is part we're going to get to in the second episode. We're going to go into like an internet kind of deep dive a little bit because there's some funny things I found just by searching about the show. But that's how it started. I didn't know that, and obviously, if you watch the YouTube video, it's like the first one. I think each of them are 5 minutes. The one from 2012 and from 2013. Yeah. I think it aired during like a Champions League kind of thing.
Oh, probably.
And it was supposed to be like a spoof, like American Coach in Europe.
Yeah.
And it was hilarious. You can see why like they instantly wanted to turn it into a show.
Yeah.
But so that's where it came from. Spoiler alert, as we go into this, I don't know about you guys, but like there's a lot of profanity in the show, and I'm going to swear. So just, for all the kiddos, earmuffs out there, right?
Yeah.
If you have kids listening,
right.
There's going to be some swearing. So the main premise is there's this American football coach hired by the owner of a fictitious Premier League soccer team to be their head coach as part of an effort by her to sabotage her own team. So she became owner as part of a divorce from her cheating husband, the wonderful Rupert. We'll get into him, I'm sure. She knows he loves the team more than anything, and if she can sabotage the team and get them relegated, it would crush him, and she would get her revenge. The whole hell hath no fury like a woman scorned kind of thing. Where does that come from?
I don't know.
I think it's
no idea.
Play. I think it's a play.
Go Rebecca.
Yes. So season 1, we'll kind of go through I would say the main concept. Season 1 is like a Major League-like story. You guys ever seen Major League?
Yep.
Okay, 1989. It's a baseball centric movie about, this woman who takes over a team from her husband who passes away and just wants to sabotage the team so she can move the team to a different city from Cleveland to Miami. Right. Wants to be around the South Beach, nightlife, that kind of thing. And obviously it backfires. So that's the main theme of season 1 is that Major League-like storyline. There's also the importance of having like a positive players coach and other subplots. Season 2 kind of gets more into like mental health and sports, which obviously we care about. That's the whole point of this podcast, is looking at mental health through the lens of sports. So that's the main theme. Also gets into like our past coming back to haunt us. Relationships are key in both seasons, but especially season 2, and then other subplots. So that's like the main kind of theme of the show. So before we're going to get into like kind of key lessons, favorite scenes, favorite characters, things like that from each season. Before we get into that, I just want to kick it to you guys just to kind of get your one thing that you really love about the show, or that you want to talk about. If you had to talk about one thing, what would it be? And I'll start with you, Madeline.
Okay. Well, I think that the reason why I watch the show is because the characters are so well written. I think we'll talk about our favorite characters later, but it's so hard to pick one because all of them
Very true.
are just so, I mean, they all have their own kind of individual piece about them that like keeps you engaged. Mm-hmm. I also just love Ted Lasso. I gotta say, that's the one thing.
Yeah.
If I had to pick, it would be Ted Lasso.
There you go.
I know it feels like a cop-out, but I'm like...
Yeah, seriously.
My favorite character...
Or Ted Lasso.
But I'm looking at like...
Tasso.
Yeah. My favorite character, like Ted Lasso, right? So, but we'll get into some of that stuff too. Honestly, maybe it's a little bit of a curveball, but one of the things that I really, really liked, and I don't know if they're going to expand upon this in season 3 at all, I doubt it, but the fact that he makes the biscuits for Rebecca is I don't know why it like sticks with me, but that's like one of my favorite things that I think it's just like a representation of like his mental, like I'm just gonna keep coming at you with positivity and kindness, and I'm just gonna keep going. And we'll talk a little bit about over optimism and potential dangers of that, but I really dug that whole like idea with him making biscuits and her like rejecting it and then just like wearing her down, and then now she like can't go her day without them. I just loved that, like that comparison. That was one of my favorite parts of the show, as like a consistent theme that's been going through both seasons.
Yeah, no, that is fantastic. I'm actually going to come at that from a same thing but different angle. I'm kind of cheating. I have two quasi ones. Obviously, the Ted Lasso quips and sayings are kind of what makes the show
money.
The positive roles of a coach, I think, is like something that really hit me at first, because we talk a lot about that, about how, especially with male coaches, and especially in the UK, I would guess, right? We talked about how they're a little bit behind when it comes to mental health. The male coaches just tend to be the opposite of Ted Lasso. They tend to be like barking orders and authoritarian and kind of vicious and that kind of thing. And so that was a breath of fresh air. So I'm cheating a little bit because that's not my main one. My main one is the biscuits in the pink box. Now, you came at it, so we're tied, right? You came at it from the angle of him. You probably came at it from a better angle, him doing that kind of gesture for Rebecca. My angle is just Rebecca consuming the biscuits, and I find that like endlessly entertaining. There's so many, like, she's such an emotional eater and drinker. It's like someone after my own heart with that. Like, I watch her and it's just like hilarious. Like, just because when I get stressed, that's what that's what I do. I just like I'll munch on donuts and cookies and whatever, that kind of thing. So seeing the way she eats, and I'm gonna go ahead a little bit because there's one thing I found on the internet, so I'll just reveal it now. Apparently, the biscuits tasted horrible. I did a deep dive.
In real life,
they tasted horrible. Then the team found out she thought they tasted horrible, and they made them taste great. And so later in season 1 and then into season 2, they actually tasted good.
Oh, good.
So it's funny. Good. She said something like, that was my best acting job of the whole show, was making those things seem like they taste great.
I'd be interested to know if she knew of the switch, and then like if the first time she tasted the new better biscuits was like that during a recording, and like getting like a genuine reaction of like, whoa, this is way better.
They taste great now.
I'd be curious about that.
I did find a recipe for the Ted Lasso biscuits, so I'll share that with you guys, because we're going to have, Madeline made us fantastic gingerbread cookies.
Yeah.
By the way, John, you left this is getting off topic,
rude.
But you left half those uneaten in the office, and I told you can't do that around me, man.
I know.
Okay?
Yeah.
I had a piece.
Devoured.
I had a piece. What do you want from me? I warned you. Okay? All right.
know.
So we're gonna have one of us is gonna have to make the biscuits and at least try it out. But it's just an endless like plot device, kind of humor device, because There's even the part, like, this gets into season 2 a little bit, so I'll rein it in. But, like, when the, Dr. Fieldstone doesn't eat sugar, she calls her a fucking asshole, which is just hilarious. Yeah. Like, who doesn't eat sugar? And then when Ted makes them with salt instead of sugar by accident, she, like, reacts strongly, but then actually says, like, oh, my God, they're actually pretty good, and calls them, like, a sneaky, salty bitch. And it's just like, oh, my God, hilarious. So this gets in the pink box, I feel like. It's just something I've never seen anything like that in another show, and I think like even the little box they're in, you just like want them really bad. Yeah, exactly. So that's my thing.
The only other person he's given them to is Higgins, right? When Higgins returned.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Only other person.
Yeah. Did he give half-eaten ones from Dr. Fieldstone to Rebecca, or did he just lie about that jokingly and then give her her own box? I think he lied about it and then gave her her own box.
I think so.
Okay,
I think so.
Or there's a scene where she eats it between chocolate he gives her.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah, he's like, gives her chocolate and the biscuits. And like, as he's telling her she should eat the biscuits as a sandwich with the chocolate, she's already taking a bite as a sandwich with the chocolate. It's really good.
There's another scene with chocolate that's hilarious. We'll get into this, but the Christmas episode where Keely is prepping for Sexy Christmas.
Yes.
And she just can't resist, like, just sticking her tongue out and getting liquid chocolate from that thing, the fondue thing she's making.
Yeah.
I was like... I can relate to being tempted to do that as well if you're trying to prepare that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we just went off on like a pink cookie box deep dive. Excuse my language. I'm going to kick it to you guys. So we're going to get into season 1 here. We're going to start with key lessons. I'll start with you, John, on this one. I kicked you Madeline on the first one. So from a season 1 perspective, what were the key lessons that you learned? You know, it could be from psychology. It could be anything, just life lessons, that kind of thing. You go.
Yeah, we've actually talked about this like off air a little bit too. But one of the things that really stood out to me was just like and this is just all credit to the writing because they spent an enormous amount of time doing this. But like the cultivation of all the different relationships and like the intricacies between Ted and Rebecca and the team, and like how there's like this momentum shift throughout the season. And one of the key components that I found was that there was like a really healthy dose of accountability. And anyone who knows me knows that I do my crying when I'm watching TV shows. Like
I'm the same.
I did not
movies,
know this.
Especially the animals.
Man, it gets me every single time. If there's like a person who's crying on TV, it's like instantaneous. Yep. Like, and Al and I watch Queer Eye. Have you guys seen that show? We can do another one.
In the past, not recently.
We can do another episode. Yeah. Every episode, it's just like uncontrollable crying. And one of the things that brought it out for me in season 1 was like there was a really healthy dose of accountability that I saw within the relationships of like someone making a mistake and addressing it, owning it, talking to the person about that. And I found that so refreshing.
Not taking it personally.
And like trying to understand that the person was either maybe misguidedly mentioned something off-putting, or just trying to like tell that they were doing something that was upsetting for them. And that really stuck with me. I don't know why that stood out so much to me. Maybe we just don't see enough of it in other TV shows or just in general. But that was probably for season 1, like that was the number one thing that I noticed. Like when they were doing relationship development, they clearly spent time focusing on like, this is how we want some of this stuff to go. And that really stood out to me. And that was nice to see. And I think that like when we're talking about relationships, or I'm talking about relationships with clients, like accountability is a part of that, and like not taking things personal. And I can't remember. There's so much of that I talk about with clients or with parents, that it was nice to hear. It was nice to see that in real time, and how, I mean, we always talk about it, like the importance of accountability, bringing relationships together, and that can cause difficult conversations. And I sound like a broken record when I go through this whole spiel, but then to actually see it and then it work effectively was just like refreshing. Because I think sometimes we don't see that as much as we should.
Yeah, it's interesting because I didn't even think about this until you just said it. But season 1, accountability in relationships or in everyday life definitely comes through. In season 2, they almost shift that into vulnerability.
Yes.
And it's like that dynamic between being accountable and allowing yourself to be vulnerable, which is the duo is so important. Do you have any examples specifically, and you don't have to, but do you have any examples from season 1 about accountability that stuck out?
I'd have to think about it. Come back to me. It'll pop into my one of those scenes will pop into my head. But there was so many. I think the big one, and this might be blurring into season 2, but I think it was season 1. Was like the relationship between, that ended the relationship, but not really, between him and his ex-wife.
Yep.
Of him just finally being like, I'm holding on to this, and that this isn't what you want. This is what I'm trying to force to want, and him just being like taking ownership of that and allowing the relationship. I would say the relationship to grow and move, maybe not together, but it was a healthy decision for him to be able to like take that on and then to be able to let her go. I don't know if it's let her go, but I think it's about just understanding that relationship is over, and by taking that accountability, being able to like let both people start to continue to move in their lives.
This actually, I'm going to kick it to you in a second, Madeline. This actually relates to one of the ones I had for key lessons, and that's like the limits of optimism. Because I think part of that accountability is how his optimism. I think his wife even says like it's just it was impossible for her to be around. Like he's too optimistic. I think she says something like that. Yeah. And then Coach Beard finally flips out on him for this kind of thing and says like, look, winning does matter. It's okay to be competitive, which is another kind of theme I had, a key lesson that it's okay to be competitive. But there's optimism is great, but if you're just seeing everything every day through rose-colored glasses, that is kind of a form of denial, in my opinion. It's a form of emotional suppression. You are sort of deluding yourself into thinking everything's fine. It doesn't mean we don't want optimism. It just means we have to be, I don't know what the percentage is, but we have to be optimistic while also being honest with ourselves about the things that we're not okay with or that do hurt our feelings or that make us feel down, and be emotionally upfront with ourselves about that to give us, I think we've talked a lot about when it comes to emotions and how to cope with those in a healthy way. You have to first acknowledge and accept that they're happening and really just be able to sit with them, give them their due. Otherwise, you are kind of pushing it down. So it relates to that. That Coach Beard finally flipping out on him, I thought was like really well timed. Mm-hmm. And it relates to why his wife, I think, couldn't, eventually kind of drifted and grew apart from him a little bit, was that it was too difficult to be around. So, any thoughts on that, or we can go into your key?
It's a good segue, because I think one of the things I noticed about season 1 and then season 2 is like season 1 felt like the characters were self-destructing, like all of them in their own way, whereas season 2 it feels like it's like they're rebranding of themselves. But I thought like a key takeaway was like forgiveness, because I think that to pair off of the accountability piece, there's so much forgiveness that happens, and not necessarily between two other individuals. Like sure, Rebecca and Ted, and Rebecca and Keeley, and Rebecca and Higgins. Like there's all these different avenues in which I guess Rebecca is having to actually apologize to a lot of different individuals, but it's forgiveness of self. Like I think that you talk about Ted being over optimistic, but then you see him like being super self-destructive and like drinking a lot and like so much distress. And so it just proves that like even though people present as a certain way in particular roles, that like at the end of the day there is some of this like really negative coping that happens. So yeah, I mean, you both were kind of in line with what I was thinking about, is just like, and Ted just like really leading with his emotion brain, like just like drastic changes to lineup and like, getting drunk over the divorce papers and his wife's son visits, like all those different moving parts. I feel like we're in line with that.
Yeah, and never has that been more like that relationship between how we present ourselves versus what's really going on been more kind of relevant than today with social media and things like that, because I think you see that kind of dichotomy quite a bit with people, kind of how they present themselves online versus what you probably know is going on behind the perfect edited picture and things like that. And it's interesting because you mentioned forgiveness, and I think that ties into a key lesson I had, which was like how to handle bullies or difficult people. Because I think Ted Lasso specifically, his ability to forgive really kind of wraps into how he deals with difficult people. Right. Jamie Tart being one of them, right? Jamie Tart's a great character, so I'm not like it's worth it, right? But he leaves that team, goes to a different team. And then ends up beating them at the end of the season by making that extra pass. And Ted Lasso gives him the note and the army figurine, kind of giving him credit for taking that extra pass, even after he, really just did everything to criticize Ted Lasso or throw everything in his face or whatever. That's like the ultimate example of forgiveness and how you handle people like that. I wish I could handle people like that in real life. I'd love to say I do. I don't. I think it's an area I could probably grow in. So maybe I'll take a little page out of Ted Lasso's playbook on that. We talk a lot about, in our working mostly, not all, but mostly with young guys in therapy about, how sometimes guys aren't ready for therapy and you have to let them walk away. So I think that's probably how I relate to it a little bit more, is that I've had young guys who, I know would benefit from the work if they gave it a chance. Not many, but they just, they've walked away before they were willing to commit to it. They stormed out, and sometimes we talk a lot to the team about this, but sometimes you have to be that therapist who they do that to, and you have to not take it personally. In case they come back, because you're modeling the right trustworthy behavior that you're not going to abandon just because they flipped out or weren't ready right away, or they're never going to come back to you, but that experience is something that's going to hit them later on and convince them to maybe go to a different therapist. So that's kind of how I relate to it. Any other key lessons from season 1 from either of you?
Well, I just have to mention, because you said watching Ted manage difficult people, I think this was season 1. The dart scene with Rupert.
That is on my favorite scenes.
Maybe the best scene.
Money,
Yeah. Okay, so I won't go too into it, but
Yeah.
talk about managing difficult people. That was really, when he's like, and I didn't tell you I'm a lefty. I was like, yes.
Which is great, because this also, we'll get into
that
this.
whole scene was just
that whole scene was
poetry.
fantastic, and it also ties into how well they. I don't want to go. We'll get into this in a second. All right, right?
Yes.
Because it relates to like movie references and music references and things like that.
Sure.
But any other key takeaways or key lessons from season 1 for you, John?
No, just to follow up when you were talking about optimism, because it's going to be a continuous theme that goes through, right?
Yeah.
Because he's like the classic over-optimistic person, and then denies the stuff that's going on. And you would start alluding to and talking about, and this is some of the stuff that comes up of like, there is an equal balance that can be had between pessimism and optimism, right? And pessimism can just be rebranded as realism.
Yeah.
And if you can't be realistic with what you're seeing, then you can't move forward, right? Like, optimism can be the locomotive after, but if you don't know what you're pulling, you're in real trouble. So, I think that some of the conversations that I have with people is around that, of like having an optimistic viewpoint of the future of that, but having a real firm understanding of what's going on like right now, being able to acknowledge, accept, and then use optimism to move forward. And that includes like, if you have a bad game or a bad day or things like that, just accepting that and then understanding like, okay, what do I need to do for myself to move forward in a more productive way? And I think for Ted, he was just about like, how do I keep coming at it with optimism? And then in season 2, we see the downfall of what that looks like, without really understanding all the other stuff that was going on for him. Clearly, like he's drinking, like Madeline mentioned, he's drinking a lot. He's doing these drastic change in behavior things, which you don't like to see. So that was, that was something that I think was really important. And I think that, again, the show did a really, really brilliant job of like presenting that as his main like technique, and then the downfalls of what that can do, like prolonged. So I thought that was really neat.
Absolutely. No, and I think that they don't ever say this or really specifically allude to it, but that you can kind of see like a bit of an IFS, like internal family systems parts work. Kind of, you see these players or these characters have different parts to them that kind of come out, sometimes to their benefit, sometimes it kind of sabotages them.
Right.
But it definitely relates to that, because I feel like what you're kind of describing, John, is like it's really important to be, I guess in IFS terms, would be like self-led, right? Like you are, in charge of your own life. You're moving forward. You're optimistic, but you also have that critic part that you can, is not jumping in without permission, but you can bring in to assess different things. One of the things that people work on in IFS is like learning about their different parts that are kind of stepping in from time to time. And the goal is to kind of get them to work in harmony, and you can bring them in almost like assistant coaches when you need them. Your goal is to not get rid of them altogether. And the critic is a good example of that. Most of the time for people, the critic is like talking too much and jumping in. I would say with Nate, this is a great example. His critic, we'll get into him because like it relates to the whole like dad issues that really permeate a lot. I know. It's tough.
Nate.
I know. Judas.
Yeah.
But it relates to like the dad issues that a lot of the characters have. Some are more far along in that exploration of self. He's not. But, he's got this critic inside his part of himself that really, I would guess, comes from his dad, obviously, and just jumps in all the time and won't let him feel good about anything. And so you start to see that critic is a valuable part. You never want to lose it because it helps you negatively assess things that need, assessment of negativity. Right. So that you're aware of what's going on and you're not deluding yourself. But if that critic comes in too much, then it just it really just sabotages your entire life.
Yeah, and it can't be a decision maker for your behavior. Right?
Correct.
That's where optimism can come in. The critic can give you like, hey, here's the information that I'm seeing that you need to work on. Right, like these are things you're feeling insecure about, not thing.
Correct.
And then let's take that information, put it through optimism, and then move forward with trying to make these feel a little bit better. But when you don't do that, you're sort of screwed.
Absolutely. So a couple other key lessons I had. One was leadership can come in many forms. I think Ted is totally open to new ideas from anyone. which is a great leadership quality. I think this is how, now it kind of backfired on him in the end, right? We'll get to that later. But him allowing Nate to really have a voice in play creation or in game planning and things like that is not something that most coaches would do, head coaches especially, and especially in like a league, professional league or that kind of thing. So the fact that he is able to keep him an open mind is kind of a good quality, I think, when it comes to leadership. The only other one I have was like there's a fine line between superstition and routine. They kind of get into superstition in sports quite a bit. The treatment room is cursed. Then when they mention the yips, they whisper and close the door, right? That kind of thing. They even reference like Voldemort and Chuck Knobloch and
I was dying.
Charles Barkley's golf swing. Yeah. So I was cracking up in that moment, but I think it's interesting because I think you see that, especially professional athletes. I don't know how soccer players stack up in terms of superstitious behavior. I know baseball players tend to be extremely superstitious. I'm trying to think of how do soccer players stack up? Do you know?
Yeah, some of the. I mean, on the whole, it's not like a conversation like it is in baseball. Where you see everyone go through their routines. And like Nomar Garcia-Parra is a prime example.
Great example.
Great example. Yep. The wrist things. But,
yes. For the people under 30 listening out there, like you
don't know what I'm talking
YouTube
about.
Nomar Garcia-Parra. Yeah. You'll see. He was actually a great player.
Right. So
I feel old.
Yeah, but for I think it's going to come across for a large majority of people. Usually comes up in like pre-work, like pre-game stuff. Like I got to tie my shoes a certain way. Or I've got to tape my shoes. I certainly was a pretty superstitious athlete growing up, specifically in soccer. Like I had to tape my shin pads on correctly. I had to wear like one of those like, I don't even know what they're called. Those like armbands for sweat. Completely useless, but I had to wear it because it was like I played better with it. So I think that there are definitely some certain. I know.
Talk.
I know. I got some work to do. I don't wear that anymore or need to.
Okay. I'll be on the lookout.
Yeah, please do. But I think there's definitely like a good healthy dose of it. Usually comes up in like pregame stuff with like how they have to warm up and pieces like that. And it's hard because pregame routines and getting yourself like settled, grounded, and in the zone, there is this fine line between like these are the things you need to do for yourself and if you don't do these things, it shouldn't affect your game.
Right.
But for a lot of athletes, that's a hard balance.
Exactly. Exactly. Because we preach kind of the need to really focus on process and hold yourself accountable to process much more than results or stats or outcomes. Right. It's like if you can boil success down to a set of habits and a process and routine, then you just trust that combined with the variable of time is going to lead you where you need to get. It's not always going to be, a linear trajectory upward. It's going to be some steps back to take 3 steps forward, but it's going to get you where you need to get. But it's very easy. That's a slippery slope. It's very easy for people to get into that routine and have it be either compulsive or very superstitious or both or that kind of thing. And it's something for people to watch out for because I think process is so key, but it can, if you tether it to luck too much, it really can blow up in your face or cause you to have some difficult emotions that you don't have to bring onto yourself. So, all right, so maybe we'll get into any other key lessons for you. Okay,
I think I got it covered.
Let's get into season 1 favorite scenes. Madeline, I'm going to go to you first. It doesn't have to be just one. You can go into a couple.
Okay. Well, the one that has to be named is the first Diamond Dog scene with Roy.
Yes, Mount Up. Which, by the way, does anyone know what song that references?
No. They play it in, I think, one of the episodes.
Nate Dogg and Warren G.
Yeah,
man.
It's actually a song. I know.
Yeah.
I just think that's like such a nice scene because obviously all of the characters like Higgins and Lasso and Beard and Nate are used to doing it. And then Roy comes in with his Keeley problem and like they're all psyched about it. And he's clearly not psyched about it. But it's just really funny. And I love how that scene keeps coming up. Like I love Higgins' wife calls and he's like, are we done here? And they all like start barking as he's like walking out of the room. Like they just, it's just, it's a cool thing to see because it shows that there is like some sort of emotionality to their connection outside of the field work. So I got to say, that's my favorite scene for sure.
No, it's great because it does keep coming back. So it starts in season 1, but the way it changes and who's involved over time kind of continues to evolve. And that's a great one. What about you, John?
Yeah. I mean, definitely stole it. So now I'm
sorry.
No, it's fine. I think the like creation.
You stole the pink biscuit.
I did
box,
too.
Okay,
I
bro?
did. I stole the
whatever,
biscuits.
Man.
Yeah, I stole the biscuits. But I think the coming together and having that was just really, really cool. I think, it kind of speaks to what you were talking about for season 2, but it was sort of like the first introduction of like vulnerability of like for all those guys, like joint vulnerability coming together and doing something like a little bit silly and funny and stuff like that. But then for them to like really take that on and then have it be a place of support for everyone and everybody. I think through season 1 and 2, every single person who's a dog, a diamond dog, has benefited from that group therapy, essentially. Everybody's benefited from that, so I think it's really cool. The other, and it relates kind of to it, but this is one I die every time. But Higgins trying to get through into the office when he's trying to climb through the window, and then it's like, forget it. I thought was kind of funny, and I just was like, I think I was crying at that point, laughing, like watching him go through too. So that was probably one of my favorite scenes, like the cultivation of that.
Yep.
Roy, and we'll talk about Roy. He's probably one of my favorite.
Yeah.
I mean, he's
Don't you dare
well,
steal away from me.
I won't. Well, just a little piece, but he is one of my favorites, and just his like harumph attitude to everything.
The growl,
the swearing, we'll get into him more, but his introduction to that was really funny because all that stuff like faded away, and you got like a real, the facade of Roy went away for a while, and you got a real glimpse of him. So I
have to go here now because you just referenced it. Did you know that the actor who plays Roy was actually just a writer on the show?
Yes.
But then by the time writing wrapped up, he grew so attached to the character that he last minute submitted an audition tape and said, like, look, if this is embarrassing, just pretend you never got it. And they gave him the part.
That's so
cool.
Yes.
How could you not?
I did not know that.
I also think that he is the one that gets pushed into most of the vulnerable places in season 1. Like, I think having him be benched was one big thing, or when Keely like makes him tell her that he likes her. So I think like it's funny how they play that against each other, of him being like the really tough exterior character from the get-go, but like he has so many vulnerable
that balance,
moments.
Yes, is so great with the exterior versus like he's just
niece,
such a softie. To his niece, yeah, he just like
Phoebe.
Yeah,
every time she like makes him feel emotional, just like utters the F word. Oh my god, it's great.
Yeah.
No, that I totally agree, and this actually relates to one of my favorite scenes. I'm going a little bit out of left field here, but it relates to the kind of the Roy, one of the many times Roy had to go through something like that, and it's the scene when Ted Lasso lets Nate talk to the team. So it's so interesting because it's like nuanced and it involves a lot of different characters in some subtle ways, but it also foreshadows a lot of the things that happen with Nate, right? So he lets Nate take the reins and really address the team with his notes, right? And he's got notes on each player, and they're very like, I mean, I would say blunt honesty doesn't quite capture it, right? It's like, in your face, smarten the fuck up kind of like attitude, and it was both hilarious and kind of needed for some of the players at the time, but it created a monster, right? It gave too much confidence to this person, Nate. He's someone who had none, and to give him that much confidence instantaneously is a dangerous move. I think confidence is something that like I think is best developed gradually. I think when a person gets it too quickly, like a child actor would be like an example of this, right? When the keys to the world are given to you too fast, it usually leads to very, very bad results. Lottery winners are another example of this, right? When all of a sudden you're on top of the world financially, but you've never had to like grind and learn the habits to manage your money. So you know what percentage of people who win the lottery lose it all?
No.
It's like over 90%. So that's like an example of that. And I feel like with Nate, that's kind of, I think Ted meant well and it was great in the moment, but if he had stepped back, maybe he would have realized like that might have been too soon.
Yeah, well, I think that's also mostly on Nate. I'm sure we'll dive into a full profile of Nate because I've got lots to talk about for him. But I also think that like confidence without self-awareness is sort of where like his trajectory goes. Like you talked about his relationship with his dad. Again, we'll talk about some of that stuff too. But like the confidence was for the wrong reasons for him, and Ted is doing it with every intention of being like, I'm seeing you as a equal on this coaching staff, and that gave him a sense of like pride. He never had that before, but then there's no awareness of like, now how do I use this appropriately? It started was like, this is for my own internal gain, and like ego was like, oh, it's there, and I can feel good about this, but not for the benefit of the team, for the benefit of the self. And I thought that was like what I noticed about that. Like, of course, like I'm dying laughing about doing it. Super needed, really, really poignant, and it was a funny scene. But you could see like oh, this could go
Yeah.
poorly. Yeah.
No, it's interesting, and I agree with you. It's definitely on Nate because, at the end of the day, a person should be able to take that kind of positive encouragement and support and go in a positive direction for it. However, I'm going to push back on you a little bit. I think when you treat someone in a leadership role as if they're equal before they're ready, I think it's risky, and I think it can backfire like this. So I think it's on Nate, but I think Ted should have known. I think if he was paying attention and didn't want to blindly make people feel good, I think he would have known that.
Possibly.
Think, and I have I'll get into this later. I have a little bit of a nitpick about Dr. Sharon Fieldstone too, because I think she should have seen some of the stuff happening in real life. I think she would have seen some of the stuff happening with Nate and intervened. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I also, before I answer that, I think remembering when Ted made that decision was like right on the heels of his like drunken night in the hotel room after the divorce.
Right.
So I think, and paired with yelling at Nate because he was like sliding the letter under the door, the envelope with his notes under the door.
Yeah. Right.
And Ted opens it and like yells at him. So it's paired with an apology.
That's right. Okay.
And then he's like, I think you should give the notes. So I am curious of like, was that Ted building him up leadership wise, or was that Ted feeling guilty for the
That's
night
a good
before?
Point.
And then,
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, and then giving him this platform to kind of like go off of. So
great point. I totally forgot about the whole like night before and the door opening incident. So in that scene, I mean, it's great because he has some great things to say to each player, and Roy and him kind of had this reciprocal moment where Roy challenges him to say it without his notes, which was kind of cool because it's like he's challenging Roy in ways that are very helpful for Roy, right? Tap into your anger. Like, what do you need to tap into that more in the field? And then Roy challenges him like, hey, if you're going to be at the big person table, like, get rid of the notes and prove it kind of thing.
Right.
So that was kind of like just the dynamic there I thought was really good.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think correct me if I'm wrong, but rarely is Dr. Sharon in the...
She's not in that. No, this was, she's season 2 totally. Yeah, this is much later.
But even in season 2, I feel like she's never in the, what am I forgetting? The room where, she's never in the locker room.
That's a good point.
Which is, I feel like, where a lot of these things transpire, especially with Nate.
Yep.
So that's just something to think about.
That's a good point. Actually, upon rewatching season 2, she's in the show a lot less than I remember from the first time. She's in it in the first 2 episodes a lot and at the end. But in the middle episodes, like she's kind of like non-existent a little. I think they have one episode that's kind of about her character and gets into like the emotional stuff under the surface. We'll get into that in season 2. But yeah, I agree with you. She's definitely maybe not around for that. So maybe that's, it's hard to pick up on that stuff if you're not, if you don't have a window into it. Any other favorite scenes from season 1 that you guys have?
There's so many, but
I know.
Yeah. No, I think we can segue next.
Okay. Yeah. I have 2 more, but the second one of the 2 segues. So one is the karaoke scene, which is all kinds of amazing. And it actually, based on a true story, I guess there is a Premier League coach that does this with his team. I forget. We can Google it afterwards. I forget which team. You would know more. Is Tottenham a team? I think it's Tottenham. The coach, either before or now, does that.
You know what? It's so hard to keep up with who the coaches, the Premier League teams these days, because they change so frequently. But yeah.
So that scene, that karaoke scene, is hilarious. It's a kind of an end at the beginning. Coach Beard nails Lady Gaga, which is just classic. We'll get into him more because he's got some random sneaky singing, dancing skills. But Rebecca clearly can sing.
Don't go into that. I'm going to talk about that later.
Okay, I'll save that. And then Ted has
put a pin in it.
Yes, Ted has a panic attack to Let It Go, which is kind of prophetic. And this is like the start of the reality of Ted being endlessly positive. I feel like the rose-colored glasses kind of getting in the way because he's burying his emotion, that kind of thing. This is like when you start to see that kind of come to the surface and backfire. My last one is the dart scene, which you brought up, right? Which is like the him sandbagging Rupert into it being like a dart shark and into the competition to get, I believe the deal was like he would let Rupert pick the starting lineup for the last 2 games if Rupert won, and if Ted won, he's not allowed in the coach's box anymore because he's trying to protect Rebecca. And then boom, a la Princess Bride, he's also left-handed kind of thing, comes in. So that to me is a segue into like some random funny things from season 1. So I'll start this off and I'll kick it to you guys. The main one I had that's just like the movie, sports, pop culture references. They're just like totally on point. One of my useless talents is like movie quotes. My memory sucks. You can ask my wife. My memory is terrible for most things, except in kind of 2 areas. Clinically, I'm usually pretty good about remembering client details. I think you kind of have to be. and then movie quotes. I'm not even good at like sports related. You think I'd be good at like sports related data? I'm not. Like my brother is. Movie quotes, I'm good, and I'm just gonna go through like all the different. If you guys have any to add, jump in at any time. But they reference Princess Bride. They reference Back to the Future, when the part where Beards mimics Doc Brown saying Ronald Reagan, the actor, kind of thing. They have Allen Iverson's Practice, or it could be talking about practice. Like that's Allen Iverson.
Practice?
It could also be Jim Mora, because Jim Mora was the NFL coach. I was like, practice?
Oh
like,
yeah.
That or playoffs. No, it says playoffs. Yeah,
playoffs. Playoffs.
Yeah, exactly.
Playoffs.
And I think they even say playoffs one time down, so I think they might reference both of those. There's Harry Potter twice. Once when they say Voldemort's name with the superstitious stuff.
Yeah.
And the second part is, I don't know if you guys caught this, but it's in the scene, the episode, it's actually season 2, episode 9, when Coach Beard goes out with the 3 fans from the bar, and they get into the club that they don't actually belong to. And one of the bar fans, in order to like convince one of the, preppy looking guys that he went to the same private school, references Professor McGonagall.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was the second Harry Potter.
Oh, that
reference.
was a good scene.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, that was a whole episode.
Yeah.
We'll get into. I have scenes, funny scenes. We talked about funny scenes from season 1. For season 2, it's less scenes and just entire episodes, but we'll get into that. So then the Believe sign above the door, I think is kind of a shout out to 2 things. One, the movie Rudy, where it's like they have Notre Dame, they play like a champion today, and they hit the sign as they're walking out. But also Angels in the Outfield, because it's you got to believe. Okay, so I don't know. We grew up on that movie, man. I know we're 4 years apart, but I grew up on that movie.
Great movie.
Great movie. Okay, and so that was kind of like a dual reference. Jerry Maguire reference. You had me at coach. Roy says that's Ted Lasso.
Yeah.
I think there was a possible underlying movie 7 reference, because they allude to several of the 7 deadly sins throughout the plot. I don't know if you guys pick up on that.
No.
There is. Ted does an impression of Kermit and Slingblade when he's voicing on calling the doctor to check on her through like standard concussion protocol. Yeah. I don't know if you guys mentioned that. Remember that. Roy has sort of an "it's not your fault" Good Will Hunting moment with Jamie after Jamie's dad punches his own dad. Yeah. They have a bird by bird They have 2 book references actually. Bird by bird is a saying they have about, which sort of stands for perseverance and patience, but it comes from a book from Anne Lamott. They have Ted's favorite book is The Fountainhead, which is actually my favorite book. I don't know how you pronounce her name. Ayn Rand? Is it Ayn Rand?
Don't know.
She wrote Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah.
I know she's kind of controversial. I think there's like some weird political things underlying her writing. Yeah. I'm too stupid to pick up on that. So I just like The Fountainhead because it's about an architect. I mean, I just like the story and the characters. So don't judge me for liking The Fountainhead. There's no political angle to my liking of Ayn Rand. The Doctor's favorite book is Prince of Tides. I've never read that. Have you guys read that? I've never even heard. I think I've heard of it, but I've never read it. Yeah. So, because he asks her what her favorite book is, and they kind of go back and forth eventually. They pulled from the movie The Game with Michael Douglas. That's a late 80s movie. For the whole Sarah, we're going to get into this later, but for the whole Sarah Coombs angle, Sarah Coombs is the hostess that Coach Beard lures out of the club saying there's a fire in her apartment. Mm-hmm. And they say subtly, like, tomorrow's going to be better for Sarah Coombs than any other day in her life because, she thought her apartment was burnt down, but it's not. Yeah. That's a reference to the movie The Game with Michael Douglas, where there's this elaborate game for millionaires where they sort of set up this, like, plot to convince them that their life is over, they're going to die, or something terrible has happened, only to reveal that none of that was true. Mm-hmm. The goal being, I've always thought there could be I have never looked into this. It's not an actual idea. It's just like one of my tangent ADHD thoughts. But like, I've always thought you could maybe create like a therapeutic approach based on this. Like, just okay, let's say someone goes through something
ruin
traumatic.
A person's life and see how they recover.
And then be like the next day,
surprise! No, hear me out. Hear me out. Let's say someone goes through something traumatic, provided there's no PTSD. I know I'm going out on a limb here. Okay, yeah. Provided there's no PTSD, what happens to them the next day? It's usually like the comparison, the black and white comparison to how bad the day before was, makes the next day seem like the best day of your life. So like I call it the migraine effect. When I was younger, I used to get migraines all the time, and they were terrible. You ever had one?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, you? They're brutal, they're right? Brutal. But the next day was like the greatest day of my life because it's like you don't have a migraine, so it's just a regular day. But by comparison, it's glorious because of how much like misery you're in. Anyway. So that's off on a
I
tangent.
I don't know, Jonathan.
I know.
Not buying in. Not buying in.
But that's the plot of the movie. They do.
It's a little more
yes.
development, I think.
Which actually relates to my last movie quote when I think Ted says, "I can handle the truth."
Yeah.
So I can handle the truth of the fact that that's never going to be an evidence-based practice.
Yeah.
But that he references A Few Good Men there. It's a movie with Tom Cruise. Any other ones that you guys picked up on?
Well, the only thing I'm going to say is that I think this is season 2, the rom-communism that he says.
I missed that one.
I think it's in the Rainbow episode, like right in the beginning.
Yeah.
But I was like looking into that a little bit more, and they were saying online that like they often reference romantic comedies throughout season 1 and season 2, just like very subtly.
Huh.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge rom-com fan. Maybe that's why I didn't pick up on it.
So
I gotta look into that. Okay. Notes.
There are subtle and blatant quotes, but he does say rom-communism. I think, I'm trying to remember. Let me look at my notes. It's like he's talking with the team, and as he's addressing them, he's talking about how you have to believe everything's going to work out in the end, like a rom-communism.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Well, so like cliches from rom-coms?
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. So like the team always bounces back. Kind of thing.
Yeah. Right. Okay. It's interesting because they reference some music too, because I got the whole Nate Dogg and Warren G reference from Diamond Dogs. But they also like the Dr. Fieldstone. This is kind of jumping ahead, but she in season 2 she dunks on Ted for the comment about doing therapy for free, and she writes. She says something like, "The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off," which I thought was from a Pharrell song. It is, but actually I learned that it was a Gloria Steinem quote from the late 90s. She's a feminist, so I didn't know that she said that quote first. That the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. So. Lots of good music and movie and sports pop culture references there. For you, let's kick to you guys. Any random funny things from season 1 that really like stood out to you?
Is this a good time for quips? I mean, I just think those are all the random ones.
If you want to, sure. We'll get back to that in the second episode, but definitely.
I think in the first episode, I'm trying to think if this was first episode now, but like he's always saying things like, "Last one there is a scotched egg." Or they always find Nate underneath the bus sleeping. Because he gets fearful that he's going to miss the bus. I didn't get that for a long time. I'm like, why is he always in the baggage
he passed
part?
out drunk there one time.
He did.
Okay.
One time
after
he did.
the karaoke scene. That's where he
And one time
passes
he
out.
got stuck in there and someone else closed him in.
And
That was the first one, I think.
Yeah.
But there's
and
other ones
maybe that one where he gets drunk and passed out is the same one where he gets nervous that he's going to miss the bus. So he decides
he was drunk.
just sleeps in there.
Yeah.
So I feel like those are good random scenes that are funny.
Nice.
Yeah.
What about you, John?
Yeah, it's funny, like from season 1, a lot of the scenes actually involved Nate, like the funny scenes, like bringing him on, watching the scene where he like addresses the team in the locker room. I thought that was hilarious. Some of the stuff with him with other players I thought was really funny. So and his character changes for me from season 1 to season 2. But a lot of my funny scenes that I remember were with Nate in them, which I thought was interesting.
That's a good point. You kind of forget about that, especially when I just binge watched them all, and obviously you finish with season 2, it leaves a bad taste about Nate in your mouth. But he was hilarious in the first season, and the writing is just obviously fantastic. So that's a great point. The only other two random funny things from season 1 I had. One is just the tea and the soda, like Ted calling tea garbage water. Fucking hilarious.
So funny.
And then the way he spits up soda water twice. One in they bookend that. So like the first scene of him at the press conference, they give him soda water and he doesn't expect it.
Yeah.
And just like coughs it up. Yeah. And then the way the season 1 ends, he actually opens it up and drinks it and spits it all out on Rebecca's face. Yeah. So that is just like great bookends for the whole first season. Yeah. And the only other one I have was the flan semantic satiation that Coach Beard does. This. It's where Ted keeps saying plan to Rebecca, plan, and then he has a moment. I've had this with the word the before, where all of a sudden the spelling and the whole context of the word makes no sense in your head. Yep. Has that ever happened to you?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So Ted goes like plan, and then like Rebecca's trying to help him out, but she has a British accent, so it messes him up even more. And then he goes to Coach Beard and he's like, "You ever just lose track of what a word means?" And he goes, "Yep, semantic satiation." And just like Coach Beard is low key like
love him,
genius, horrible with relationship choices. We'll get into that at some point, I'm sure, but like clearly he reads. You can tell he reads a lot, and he's just a very smart dude. Yeah. I also love when he says "baby."
Yeah.
I wish I'd written down how many times he says that and what things. Are all good references. So that's what I have. Any other thoughts for you guys on things from season 1?
I'll just say, I think when you go back, because I went back for this, they're building Nate's negativity from the start.
Yep.
So it's like subtle. So even though you're like, he's endearing a little bit in the first season, when you go back and watch it, you're like, oh, here are all these like small moments that he's actually being quite devious.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And I can't remember, was the dinner table reservation, was that season 2 or season 1?
Season 2.
I think that's season 2.
Okay, it might be season 2. Okay, great. So we can talk. We'll talk about, but that's another sort of like subset of foreshadowing for like the type of personality that's like emerging for him.
Absolutely. Yeah. Did either of you spot that out in terms of like before you watched season 2? Did you spot out what was going on with Nate's character? I don't think I did.
No, I mean just with the dad thing. Yeah, definitely in season 2 with the dinner table.
Yeah,
but his negativity, no.
Okay,
did not.
When Roy was brought into the room as like another coach, I think that's season 2 though, right?
That's season 2.
Yeah, right. So no, season 1 I had nothing. Okay. That was when Roy came on, I was like, you could tell. Like, they were pretty over your head.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Nate's not okay with this.
Yeah, we're gonna get into like in the next episode, we're gonna get into maybe predictions for season 3 and something like that. So we'll try to call our shot in terms of what we think. You know, trying to zoom ahead what we think might happen or what you guys hope to see happen. Because I got a few things. But so that does it for the first. We're gonna break this into 2 episodes because we're almost at an hour now. We'll do the season 2 of Ted Lasso in the next episode. So just a reminder to everyone. We're going to put any helpful links. I might put the recipe for Ted Lasso's biscuits in the show notes. Okay, so check that out. Please subscribe to us on YouTube. Leave some comments, especially on this episode. We're trying to engage more with people. And you can also follow me on Twitter. So it's at Jotham, LICSW. My follower count is rising, Johnny. I'm just let everyone know. Be careful. Popular. I'm just getting started.
Yeah.
And I have some good dialogues.
Don't let your head get too big.
Well, no, it's not about. I don't give a shit about follower count. I give them, like, if the follower number means more people are going to engage, I'm all about it. And it started to happen. Like, I have a few people that actually requested. Like, I put out a tweet about like if we could do any episode for the podcast about mental health.
Cool.
What would you want to see? I had one person reference. She referenced postpartum depression. Then she said like, oh, but I guess you guys are male focused. And I said, no, like, our work is mostly with young guys, but the podcast really gets into a lot of different mental health topics. So we're going to need some help from you, Madeline, on that postpartum depression episode. Another person requested another more deep dive into depression and anxiety. And then there was another one. I texted you about it. What was the third one? Oh, it was about how to manage like online life, like personality, identity, online life in online, but also Web3 in the NFT world, that kind of thing, versus being yourself in IRL, in real life, and how those two mix and how to stay in a good place mental health wise, which I thought was like a great request.
Yep.
And it's something where, look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like we have all the answers, especially because that world is very new.
Right.
But I think it would make for a great episode. Yeah. It's something that I think we should brainstorm about, because I think there's going to be a lot of people now, but especially in the next 5 years, who probably struggle with balancing those two things. And I think we can get into like maybe some good insight into how to possibly do that.
Sure.
Yeah, well, I think for a lot of people, like their online personas value that more than they do their in real life persona. So for sure, like finding ways to talk about how to balance those things is both important, but how do you balance that?
Yeah, especially because I think for some people, their online life might be more authentic to who they are, and they're just nervous to be themselves in real life. Right. For other people, they're themselves in real life and they're using online to be someone they're not. And so there's a lot of different kind of nuances there that I think would be really interesting to get into. So that's going to be exciting. And we joke about like follower count and stuff like that. It's I'm excited because the higher it gets, the more I feel like we'll be able to help people.
Sure.
Because the last year I haven't been trying to do anything on Twitter. So it's mostly just like throwing out some shitty negative comment about the Celtics just underperforming. Yeah. And not shockingly, I was at about 53 followers for most of the year, because I don't think people really want to hear that.
So just to plug Celtics, if you're looking for someone to come on in and help, I'm happy to come on in and do some help for you guys.
Yes, absolutely. We are here. Need it. Our hat is always in the ring.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Brad Stevens. You heard it here.
You heard it here first, yeah.
Well, that does it for today. Again, thank you for everyone for listening to this episode of the Grim Drive Podcast. Thank you, Madeline, for joining us.
Thanks.
She's going to be back for the next podcast episode about Season 2 of Ted Lasso, which we're going to have next week. Thanks, everyone.